Hey folks, how you all doing? So today I'm going to be ranking the 8 post-Beatle albums by John Lennon. This was really good. I hadn't heard a lot of John Lennon's albums over the last year or so because I've been more wrapped in George Harrison, so it was good to get back to listening to John Lennon. Couple of the albums here ranked a little bit lower than I thought they would, and vice versa. Couple ranked a little bit higher than I thought they would, but that's what it is, you know. Times change, eras change, perspectives on things change, etc. As I said, it's the 8 post-Beatle albums. I'm not going to be looking at Two Virgins, Life with the Lions, or the Wedding album, simply because they're not really songs, they're not really albums as albums, so I'm not really interested in those anyway. I have heard them, I don't own them, I don't care to own them. Anyway, let's get on with what we have. So at number 8, I have Rock and Roll from 1975. This one's number 8 purely because I'm not a fan of covers albums. They don't work for me. They're more novelty value than anything else. So yeah. I do love the single Stand By Me. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think that's a lot better than Benny King's original. But as it stands, as I said, not a fan of covers albums, so this one takes our 8th spot. That gets a score of 4 out of 10 from me. Number 7 on the list, I have this one, 1984's Milk and Honey, a posthumous release. Like Double's Fantasy, it's a John song, a Yoko song, a John song, a Yoko song, etc, etc. I get the format, I understand it. It worked really well on Double Fantasy. It actually does work well here. For the most part though, I think John's songs are quite weak. They sound unfinished, more like demo versions. They're a bit rough and raw. Yeah, it makes you wonder whether these songs, or the majority of these songs, would have actually have been released had John lived past 1980, when he was obviously murdered. So for that reason alone, this one comes in 7th spot. However, there is one song I do love on this album. That's the single Nobody Told Me. This album, also like Rock and Roll, comes in at 4 out of 10. Number 6 on my list, I have 1973's Mind Games. Upon first listen, the songs sound fairly weak musically and lyrically. However, when you listen to it over and over again, it's a refreshing step away from the politics of the previous 12 to 18 months that John was applying in his, sometime New York City thing, all his protests, etc. in America. So this is quite refreshing. So that begs the question, was John actually being sincere or playing mind games with his audience? It's up to us to decide as individuals, I guess. Could be a bit of both with John Lennon. Very clever man, very intelligent man. No real standout tracks on here for me. It's just a solid collection of songs that really work well together and they flow nicely. 6 out of 10. At number 5 on the list, I have 1972's Sometime in New York City. There is a bit on the back of the album that says bonus live jam LP, so I'm treating that second disc as a bonus, so it's not included here. Had it have been included here, it would have been a lot further down the list. But as we're dealing with the first disc, which is studio albums, studio songs I should say, this one comes in a lot higher. I just wish All Things Must Pass by George Harrison, the third album, which was the live jam stuff, I wish that had just been labelled bonus material as opposed to part of the album, because that would have made that whole album a lot higher in my rankings there as well. Anyway, I've got to admit, I used to really love this politically charged album. John's politics have worn a bit thin over the years with me. I don't know why. Maybe I've grown up, maybe I've matured, maybe my political values have changed. I don't know, but it's just worn a bit thin. To be honest, there's still not a bad track on here, even though I don't love it. There's not a bad track on this album. Even Yoko's 3 tracks are fairly decent. I do love her We're All Water song. I think that's absolutely fantastic. It's probably the best song she ever recorded, and I really, really do love that. It's a fairly solid collection of songs here. My favourite would have to be, let me see, Woman is the Nigger of the World. That would still have to be my standout track from this album. It does come in at 7.5 out of 10. Anything above 7.5 is an album that I consider that I love. So this just slips down slightly from where it should have been several years ago. Number 4 on my list, I have 1974's Walls and Bridges. There's just not a weak song on here. Well, except the cover of Lee Dorsey's Ya Ya, which I still like. I just don't love it. These are well-crafted songs with some excellent production. It's a slick album. It's, as far as slick albums go, this is it for John Lennon, in my opinion. Favourite track on here is Scared, which really, with its lyrical content, wouldn't have been too far out of place on the Plastic Ono Band album, his album from 1970, which is coming up. Anyway, this album still comes in at an excellent 8.5 out of 10. Number 3 for me, this album drops slightly in my rankings. It would have been 1 or 2, depending what mood I was in, until a year or 2 years ago, but it slipped to 3 at this stage. We have 1980s, a bit out of focus there. There we go. His comeback album, Double Fantasy. John's death actually affected me quite badly as a 13-year-old. I got into Paul McCartney at this stage. I knew who Wings were, I knew who the Beatles were. But for John Lennon to actually have a song released in my, I wouldn't say my lifetime, but in my musical purchase in life, that was a big thing for me. And then to have him basically blown away, less than a month after the single was released, it's shocking. Sometimes I still feel that when I listen to this album. There's a bit of pain there sometimes. But yeah, as I said, I got Starting Over when it was released. I purchased this album the week of release, and then obviously, a couple of weeks later, John Lennon was dead. Yeah, really sad. When you take the time to listen to the song, as I said with the Milk and Honey one, this one is a John song, a Yoko, a John, a Yoko, a John, a Yoko. When you actually take the time to listen to the lyrics and read them correctly from the inner sleeve, you actually find that Yoko's song, which follows a John song, is actually lyrically similar to John's song. However, Yoko's ones are from a female perspective, whereas John's is from his perspective. So it's very, very cleverly created, crafted and made, in my opinion. It really is a masterpiece and a very, very good return to form from a guy that had been out of the industry basically for 5 years. Favourite track on here is also Paul McCartney's favourite track, which is Beautiful Boy, Darling Boy. Again, the album comes in at an excellent 8.5 out of 10. Number 2 on my list, 1971's Imagine. This album contains his signature tune, obviously the title track, Imagine. But you know what? I really don't care for that song. I've never liked it. I never have. I don't know what it is. Something about that track, Imagine, just irks me. And yeah, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I just can't. Whether it's the piano, whether it's the vocals, whether it's the lyrics, I have no idea. I just do not like that song whatsoever. For me, there is another downside to this album, and that's the track I Don't Want to Be a Soldier. Although the track Imagine actually fits musically with the rest of the album, I Don't Want to Be a Soldier doesn't. It just feels like it's been tacked on. Now, I don't have the vinyl of this, but I Don't Want to Be a Soldier is the final track on side 1. It just feels like it's been tacked on there, and it just doesn't go with it. So basically 2 songs I don't like. The rest of this album I absolutely love. It's a masterclass of songwriting, all-round songwriting, from vocally, lyrically, musically. It's absolutely brilliant in my opinion. A few years ago this album would have been a bit further down my list, probably around number 3, maybe number 4, but it's just crept up slightly over the last year and a half. As I said, favourite song on here is the jaunty, upbeat yet lyrically vicious Crippled Inside. I absolutely love that. I probably could have picked one of 8 songs of the other 8 songs, or the other 7 songs that I love, and I wouldn't have had a problem saying any is my favourite track ahead of others, because they're just absolutely brilliant. This album comes in at 9 out of 10 for me. Now that leaves one album. Lennon fans are going to know exactly what it is. 1970s Plastic Ono Band. All I can say about this one, it's a complete masterclass of raw emotion and angst-driven pain. From the opening chimes of Mother through to the haunting My Mummy's Dead, the 49 50-second semi-song track thing at the end of the album. I've never heard an album that quite feels and sounds like this album. It's my favourite album by any... It's my favourite solo album by any of the 4 Beatles. There's just nothing that compares to it. It's just pure, drenched emotion throughout this entire album. Absolute masterclass. It's certainly been my top 10 greatest albums of all time, without a shadow of a doubt. Where it appears in my top 10, I don't know. I will do a top 10 or top 20 greatest albums of all time. This will certainly be top 10. Favourite track for me is the pain-drenched opening track, Mother. Just with its whole primal scream thing, it's just absolutely... There's nothing before it. I can imagine being, you know, a Beatles fan, growing up with the Beatles, then all of a sudden you buy John's first album and listen to Mother. It would be an absolute blast in your face. It's just nothing like it had been recorded by him previously. Absolute masterclass. I said even the album cover is absolutely brilliant, but it hides, it's so serene and peaceful, and yet it hides the angst and pain that's inside it. This one comes in at a 10 out of 10 for me, and not many albums do come in at a perfect 10 out of 10. Probably half a dozen in my collection. That's one of them. Anyway guys, that's my look at the 8 solo albums or / albums with Yoko Ono, Plastic Ono Band, etc. in my music collection. Feel free to leave your rankings of your 8 in the comments section below. If you think I've got something wrong factually, let me know as well. I'm always open. We all make mistakes. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of my ranking and how yours would compare. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe. Take care. All for now. Catch you around for the next video. Bye, folks.